Kratom is, I think people are trying to call it an opiate. I don't know if it's technically an opiate, but it's legal. You can buy it and it helps people, and it actually alleviates a lot of the symptoms of opiates.
While Kratom itself is not classified as an opioid, it is known for producing these opioid-like effects, especially in higher doses. Hello and welcome to the Dr. Suzette Glasner podcast. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you want to continue to learn from me. Please drop your comments on YouTube and email me your comments, questions, or any suggestions you might have about topics that you'd like to see covered on the show at askdrglasner@gmail.com. So Kratom has been kind of a hot topic in the news media. We're seeing a lot of Kratom related products causing addiction, overdoses, and lots of different types of problems for folks. So I did a little search to see who's been talking about Kratom outside of the media and news. And I happened upon a video from about 6 years ago that featured Joe Rogan on his podcast, and he was talking about Kratom. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what I noticed in his video and how it actually parallels what we're seeing today, fast forward 6 years later. Strikingly, I would say, so much has changed about our knowledge of Kratom just from scientific research, but yet so little has changed in the way that people think about it, and I think the confusion about what it is and its potential risks and harms. For those of you who are not really familiar with Kratom, just as a quick overview, Kratom is an herbal extract. It's found in Southeast Asia, tropical countries. It's from the leaves of the evergreen tree, and its leaves have been used as a substitute for opium in the treatment of pain, and it acts on the brain's opioid receptors. Now, traditionally in Southeast Asia, its leaves have been either chewed or placed in a tea. And at low doses, it has stimulant type effects. So it can help with wakefulness and energy. So people in Southeast Asia traditionally have used this to improve their work productivity and also to counteract fatigue. At higher doses, it has been used as a substitute for opium in the treatment of pain and diarrhea. But when I watched this clip of Joe Rogan, one of the first things he expressed was sort of a confusion about what type of substance Kratom is. It's not regulated.
Kratom is, it's like a plant-based, I think people are trying to call it an opiate. I don't know if it's technically an opiate, but it's legal.
There's this sort of question about, is it an opiate? Isn't it an opiate? And so while Kratom itself is not classified as an opioid, it is known for producing these opioid-like effects, especially in higher doses. And this is because its core compounds, which are known as mitragynine and 7-hydroxymitragynine, or 7-OH, they produce these effects by stimulating the mu opioid receptors in the brain. Now, these are the same receptors that are activated by some of the better known opioids like fentanyl, oxycodone, hydrocodone, and even heroin. The compounds in Kratom that produce those effects most potently, like 7-OH, are found in very small trace amounts in Kratom.
But it's legal. You can buy it and it helps people, and it actually alleviates a lot of the symptoms of opiates.
I'm pretty sure I know what he means, which is that it alleviates symptoms of opioid withdrawal. Now, we know that addiction to opioids is very much driven by symptoms of opioid withdrawal. So people end up in this sort of vicious cycle where initially opioids make them feel really, really good. Not only do they reduce and help with pain management, but they also produce this euphoria or rush. But when you come down from opioids, it's a pretty awful feeling all around. Physically, emotionally, your body aches, you feel like you have the flu. And this is not just like any flu. Like, this is a flu-like syndrome that people come to dread intensely enough that they will go to desperate measures to avoid opioid withdrawal once their body has become really hooked or dependent on opioids. And so what Joe was referring to when he said it actually relieves a lot of symptoms of opiates is that people have been using Kratom increasingly to manage symptoms of opioid withdrawal and as a way to try and get off of more powerful opioid to which they might be dependent or addicted, like opioid painkillers, for example. And we now know that people often end up needing to go on the same types of medications to get off of opioids. So we have like opioid replacement therapies, more commonly known as Suboxone or methadone, you might have heard of, that people often have to be taking over the long term in order to stabilize their brain and stabilize their lives, quite frankly. And these are life-changing treatments. We are seeing from research studies that there are many cases of individuals who end up needing to go on those medications to get off of Kratom. So it is producing in some individuals this syndrome of Kratom use disorder, we would call it, just like we have a syndrome of opioid use disorder or substance use disorder, the most severe form of which is what we refer to as an addiction. We're seeing Kratom use disorders as well, and people have to get involved in taking the same types of medication treatments to get off of Kratom and stay off of Kratom as they would if they had come in with an addiction to Vicodin, hydrocodone, or even heroin. Now, that's not everybody, but this does happen among a subgroup of individuals, and we are doing research to find out just how prevalent that is and how common and frequent it is. I will say in my clinical practice, I have seen this very syndrome with people coming to me because they cannot get off of Kratom. 6 years ago, Joe had this general understanding of Kratom as being kind of a treatment for opioid addiction in a sense by alleviating withdrawal symptoms, because if a person were able to eliminate their withdrawal symptoms from opioids, they wouldn't have the need to go chasing opioids anymore. So if Kratom were effective in that way for everyone who took it, we would have a really big game changer in the field of opioid addiction treatment. But the fact is, that's not really what we're seeing with Kratom. It's really a mixed bag.
And I was asking a friend of mine who takes it all the time, I go, how much do you take? And he's like, I take 10 pills. I tried it. I think I took 8. I don't even think I took 10. And I was up.
So is it like a heady buzz or like a body?
It's a heady thing. It's a weird one. Like, I was really shocked at how high I got.
Why he's surprised he got high, to me, is really interesting, because the perception around Kratom in general that I've observed is that it's just an herb and it helps you feel good, perform well, have more energy if you need it for the stimulating effects, and maybe relieve some aches and pains if you're experiencing those types of symptoms and you take a little bit more. But that's really the tricky part about Kratom and some of the related products that we're hearing about in the media as causing overdoses like 7-OH, is that they're really marketed as feel-good supplements that help with mood and pain relief and cognitive performance and stress management. And since it's unregulated and not approved by the FDA for any of these indications, people really take it without being informed of both the benefits and the risks. You don't really see warning labels on any of these Kratom or 7-OH products that say, hey, you could actually become dependent or addicted to this, because it's not regulated and it's not required. And that would obviously make people a little more hesitant to take it, especially if they have known vulnerability to addiction. Now, I consider Joe to be a very discerning and well-read and educated person. And so the fact that he, 6 years ago at least, had this sort of perception like, oh, it's good for a lot of things, and was surprised that he got really high when he took a large quantity of it, signals to me that at that time he really wasn't in the know about this Kratom as being a substance with addiction potential.
And then you get a tolerance for it. So a lot of these guys are taking like 10 pills and then going to the gym and they're like, oh, I need it for my back. I'm like, you're getting blasted.
But yeah, that's like that with booze and all drugs. It feels like you kind of chase that thing.
So he seemed pretty aware that you do develop tolerance. Tolerance to any substance is an indication that at least on a physiological level, you are developing a physical dependency. The psychological dependency is a little bit of another story, but they often do go hand in hand. So he mentioned that he knows people who go to the gym and take 10 of them and can totally function through it, which to him was an indicator that they have tolerance. And he's totally right about that. Even though he knew that it had this addictive potential, he still popped 8 of them. There was another show where he talked about just having popped quite a few of them before going on the show because he had some ache or pain or something that he was trying to deal with. And I think why he popped that many of them, even though there's this addiction potential, was probably just to see what would happen, because the perception of it in general is that it's an herb and it's helpful. And that is the same kind of trap that we fell into with prescription opioid experimentation with younger people and addiction, and eventually trends of overdose of prescription opioid painkillers in younger people like teens. And that led to quite a few tragedies among young people. And we have a similar thing with herbs and extracts. People are really drawn to like these natural ways of overcoming everyday ailments and problems because it feels like it's a healthy option that can work just like a medication that might not be so good for you. But that is actually pretty ill-informed. We're still doing a lot of research on kratom and trying to understand its addiction potential, what proportion of people will become addicted to it. We actually really don't know. And because it's unregulated and there are so many products out there that are labeled as kratom or kratom extracts, but are actually something else like 7-OH, which is highly potent, highly addictive, and is driving a number of overdoses right now. Kratom in and of itself, unless you really know what you're getting, is not inherently safe.
If you have an addictive personality and you have a problem with anything, there's a lot of people that get into that kratom stuff.
So another thing that Joe Rogan mentioned was that people with addiction history should probably be extra cautious about taking something like kratom. And that's something he was absolutely right about, because the majority of overdose deaths that we've seen related to kratom have been in the context of kratom having been taken in combination with other substances. And people who tend to mix substances in this way are usually people who are somewhere on that spectrum from mild to severe addiction. And yes, I agree with him. These are the individuals who need to be especially cautious when they start taking a kratom product. We know that there's such a thing as kratom addiction and kratom use disorder. But as I noted, what proportion of people who take kratom are going to end up developing that and what the specific risk factors are, we can think of some intuitively, like, of course, somebody with addiction history probably ought to be extra careful. But those risk factors are really poorly understood for kratom in particular. And now that there are more kratom-like products that are being marketed as enhanced kratom and or kratom extracts, but they're actually 7-OH and not kratom, it's really important to be aware that 7-OH products are highly concentrated in the compound 7-OH in a way that is not true of kratom itself. So it's really deceptive for these to be marketed as kratom extracts, something that resembles kratom, when in fact they are getting a highly potent opioid that is potentially up to 13 times more potent than morphine and highly addictive. I'm starting to get referrals to my practice and calls for consultation around cases of addiction, detoxification, and overdose related to 7-OH specifically. So that's how I know that it's not just news reports in the media that are all hype about this, but it is actually a real thing because I'm seeing it. So I hope that you learned something valuable today, and I look forward to seeing you next time.